We've all been there. You wake up on Saturday and you're like, oh crap, I forgot. Company's coming in a few hours. I haven't prepared crap. Everyone knows I love and do barbecue well, but I don't have time to do a brisket. I don't have time to do like ribs properly, beef, nothing. So what are you gonna do? Number one, panic. Always panic first. You give yourself like a few minutes to panic, figure it out. Two, maybe step two, crack a cocktail, depending on what kind of time of day it is. But number three, remember that I got you. So can you do a brisket in 2.5 to 3 hours? The answer is yes. It's a California brisket. Now, before you're like, that's not a real brisket, it is a real brisket if you ask anyone in California, in the Santa Maria area. Now, it's the tri-tip. Today we're gonna use the tri-tip, and that comes from basically like the corner of beef between like the sirloin and the flank, near the haunches. And when you get that little piece of meat, it's actually magical. And you often see it cut up as in steaks, or like you can do it as a brisket, as a roast. And that's the way that I like to do it if I have just a little bit of time, but not like a time for enough for a brisket, right? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna cook this thing. We're gonna do a reverse sear. My favorite way to do steaks or beef, whatever. It's the most, in my opinion, one of the most reliable ways to get consistent results time and time again. And it really lends itself well to a variety of environments, smokers, cookers, stoves, everything. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna get this thing open, we're gonna trim it, we're gonna put it on the Traeger, 2 hours at 225. Once that's done and it reaches an internal temperature, I'm gonna go for about 136 today. 136, we're gonna pull it, we're gonna sear it, and then we're gonna let it rest, just for about 10 minutes or so. And then we're gonna cut it, and it's gonna be delicious. So let's get right into this guy, waste no more time, because obviously you're in a hurry, you got company coming, and we need to do a brisket in about 2.5 hours. So let's get cracking. So it's called the tri-tip because obviously it has 3 tips, 1, 2, and 3. One of the reasons why they call this a California brisket is because it's similar in that it has 2 muscles running perpendicular to each other. So when we cut this, we're gonna have to cut against the grain in order to have the most tender and juicy pieces of meat. So when you get it, I found one that has a nice, good fat cap on it. We're gonna come back to that in a second. And here, we're gonna turn it over to the meat side and really get some of this like kind of hanger-on fat here that's kind of awkward. We want to get a lot of that off. So what we're going to do is we're going to get some of this stuff off like the meat side, much like you would on a traditional packer brisket. If you have the time, you want to try to get some of this silver skin off. If you don't, it'll still work out. But you know, this one's not going to be cooked as long as like beef ribs or pork ribs or brisket. So any number of this stuff that you can get off, go ahead and do it. This is going to cook pretty quickly, you know, in comparison. So you want to kind of give it all the help it needs. All right, we could keep going, but this is going to be fine. Once we turn it over, we can see we have this nice fat cap here. Now, it's kind of a weird fat cap because it's very stringy and kind of pull aparty, which it makes it a little bit more difficult for a consistent trim. We want the fat cap, but we want to trim it down so it's not so thick. Since it doesn't have a lot of time to render down, we will be searing this at the end, but if it's too thick of a fat cap, it's not gonna have all that time to like render down the way you would on a brisket or some beef ribs. So we wanna just trim it down just a little bit, but we wanna maintain that fat cap because obviously we want all that delicious flavor. So we're gonna trim it down just a little bit and we'll go from there. In way of seasoning, we're under the gun. If you've got some time, salt this guy up, both sides, put it back in the fridge, and let it just kind of sit there with the salt for an hour or 2. We don't have time, we've got company coming over, so we're gonna kind of take a quick shortcut, but you will still have glorious results. All right, so first thing, of course you know it, salt and pepper. I'm doing my 60-40 mix because that's my favorite ratio, so we're gonna get this going. We don't need a binder or anything, or I'm not gonna do one today, but I do want a nice, generous shake. We're gonna get that nice fat cap going. All right, so next, a little bit of garlic powder. Now, normally it'd be great if you could do some fresh garlic. Remember, we're on the time crunch though. Then about a year ago, I spent a little time with the mad scientist himself, Jeremy Yoder, and he mentioned this really cool seasoning. It is the Lane's Barbecue Granulated Honey. They recommended this for tri-tip. So we're gonna give this a chance. This stuff is actually pretty dangerous because it tastes good right out of the bottle. So I've definitely tested this seasoning more than a few times. So we're gonna see what this does to the flavor profile. You can see there's really big grains here, so I'm not too worried about smoke penetration. It'll allow it all to get through, all right? We'll do both sides, of course. Get that nice and high, close to your eye. Otherwise, you'll go for a ride. And don't forget your sides. That was the lamest thing I've ever done in barbecue. All right, a little garlic. And some more of that granulated honey. And so that I practice what I preach, I'm gonna do this. Now, since we're not gonna do like the rest, the 2 hour, like the hour or two kind of salt, salt deal, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna leave this sit for 20 minutes and I'm gonna get it on the smoker at 225. So let's get ready to do that and I'll meet you on the smoker. See you in a few. So to get our reverse sear started, we're gonna put it on the smoker at 225 for about 2 hours. Now, once we get it on there, we're gonna get a lot of nice smoke flavor. We're gonna get it up to the internal temperature and then we're gonna sear it on the stove. Again, nice and easy, super quick. We're gonna go fat side down since the heat's coming right there from the heat shield. So fat side down, 2 hours, 225. Let's get it on. All right, if you're doing this on an offset smoker, I'd probably put the fatter side towards the fire, just to kind of penny how that was. But since this is a Traeger, we don't have 2-pellet smoker. Normally I would just time it and use my instant read thermometer. But our meter sent me their wireless thermometer and they asked me to give it a chance and see how I like it. So we're gonna give this a chance. We're gonna do a leave-in probe style. I'm gonna wanna get it in all the way to the line, put it in the thickest part of the beef where I'm gonna get the reading. Let's get that guy in there. All right, we want this to come to an internal temperature of about 135. We'll check it out in the app and we'll come back and we'll get it ready for the sear after about 2 hours. So we got the probe in, start, let's go to beef. Let's do like 136 like my family likes it. And then good to go, medium rare. Start cook. All right, and there we go. Okay, it's raining and the lens is all foggy. So you can see that's showing 137 on the probe. Let's check it out on the instant read and then we'll pull the meat. All right. You may not be able to tell, but that says 136, so that's pretty good. All right, nicely done, Armitor. Let's get this bad boy inside and get that sear going. So I got an alert at the 90-minute mark saying that the meat was at temperature. So I went out there in the rain, as you saw, and I wanted to check it against the Thermapen. And they were about within 1 degree of each other, which is pretty impressive. So the next thing we want to do now is get it into the skillet, get it seared, and then get it ready for slicing. Now I'm using this pot. I mean, technically a cast iron would be the best option, but I'm using this one specifically, even though I have a cast iron, because not everyone does. And sometimes you're, again, in a hurry. You don't have time to preheat your cast iron all the way. So preheat your pan, get the butter in there. I'm using a stick of butter because every time I use less than a stick of butter, everyone always gets on my case about it. I'm not using enough butter. So here we go, full stick. It's probably gonna be a little bit of overkill, but I don't care. So we're gonna let that finish melting down while I get the tri-tip. Look how awesome this thing looks, my goodness. And you can see very clearly how you have the grains running this way and that way. We're gonna cut against the grain when we're done. Listen to that sizzle. In the end, I only needed to have it sear for about 2.5, 3 minutes each side. And I wanted to show you specifically where the grain runs, that way we'll know how to cut it. And you can see here, I let it sit in the butter a little too long there. But look at that great mahogany color from the smoking, it's awesome. So we're gonna cut right about here. So let's go ahead and bifurcate this thing right down the middle. All right, let's see that cross section. Look at that. That is absolutely perfect. I'm impressed with the R meter's accuracy. I tell you, sometimes with these Bluetooth thermometers, I get a little concerned that they're not gonna give me quite the accuracy, but that was right on target. So, I mean, it's perfect. Here I do wanna show you some of that fat cap I was talking about. We trimmed it perfectly so that when you're looking here, you don't have too much of a fat ring, but you do have some fat. That way it'll make every bite delicious. Now, looking at the side of this, you can see that the grain is running this way, so we're gonna wanna cut it this way. So let's do just that. So we're gonna take this one, we're gonna cut against the grain for a more tender bite. Okay, and then on the other one, we're gonna do the same thing, but we're gonna turn it so that we're going against the grain on this one. And this one's running this way, so we'll get some small pieces here. Cut, super tender. Okay, as I always say, you have to check for poison. It is our obligation to the people eating the barbecue that we make. So let me be the first to take the sacrificial piece. This is a huge bite too. Man. Yes. Okay, all in, we're at about 2 hours with a reverse sear cook, a sear, a 10-minute rest, and then into the slice. So this is really wonderful. One thing that I wanted to mention from earlier is you really want to try and get prime beef if at all possible. Anything else is going to be fine, but you're really going to get the best results from the prime beef. The most tender, the most juicy, it's going to be awesome. When you're ready to serve, you can actually, if you want to do like some like really coarse grained kosher salt over the top, gives it that nice little presentation and kick. And here's my favorite pro tip about a tri-tip. Once everybody's done eating and you have and if you have any left over, depending on how many people you have, what I strongly recommend is you just put it on a plate and then just kind of wait. You got a couple of drinks, hanging out with your friends, you want a little munching, a little piece of the old tri-tip there. Now, while this is the 2 hour California brisket tri-tip, I'm using the jargon here, we will be doing a hot and fast competition style brisket. It's gonna be the actual full packer brisket, hot and fast, and we're gonna be doing that really soon. So check that video out, see you on the next one, and in the meantime, I'm gonna enjoy some more 2 hour brisket. Thanks guys, we'll see you soon.